Away there, Mr. Austin. Lovely.
Nice to meet you.
You're,
Oh.
I can confirm you're live.
Okay, let's get this show rolling. So I'll call the meeting to order and we'll start with a land acknowledgement. So the Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. So we'll go through the roll call. We'll start with our Vice Chair, Councillor Wei Mason, who apparently is here, but does not appear to have any.
Sorry, I lost the window. It turned into the little one and I couldn't find it. Hi, everyone. Yes, Councillor Mason, District 7, Halifax South Downtown, present and correct.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Mason. Next up, Councillor Tony Mancini.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and colleagues. All ready to go.
Thank you, Councillor Mancini. Councillor Lindell Smith.
Here and accountable.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sean Cleary.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, colleagues, public staff. We're here and ready to go.
Thank you, Councillor Cleary. That would give us a full house tonight of all councillors. So moving along, approval of the minutes from March 23rd. Can somebody move that? I see Councillor Mason has waved his hand. Second.
Second.
Councillor Smith is second. All those in favor? Aye. Minutes are approved. Next up, approval of the order of business and additions and deletions. Mr. Clerk, do we have any additions or deletions tonight?
There are
Should say
no
yes,
additions. All good. There are no additions or deletions this evening.
Thank you. So can we get someone to move the order of business or
So
agenda? Moved by Councillor Cleary. Come on, one of you three's got to second it.
Second.
Sure.
Second by Councillor Smith. Question on that?
Question?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, so we have the approval of the order of business. So businesses arising out of the minutes, we have none. We have calls for declaration of conflict of interest. Anyone have any conflicts tonight? Seeing none. No, we have no motions of reconsideration. There's no motions of rescission. We have no deferred business. We have no tabled matters. We have no public hearings. Correspondence. Ms. Clerk, do we have correspondence?
There was no correspondence received from the clerk's office.
Thank you. Does anyone on council have any petitions tonight? Seeing none, I assume, Ms. Clerk, you don't have any petitions for us either?
No petitions.
Thank you. We have no presentations. There are no information items to bring forward. So that brings us to our main agenda item here, which is the district boundary review. So we'll go over to Liam for the staff presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Ian McLean, our municipal clerk, is going to lead us off, and Joe is going to bring up the presentation for us because my computer doesn't want to agree with me tonight or any other night for that matter. So once we get that presentation queued up, I'll turn it right over to Ian.
So, Mr. Chair, through you to the rest of the community council, as this presentation is getting queued up, I'll start off by saying a sincere thank you for having us at your meeting tonight. We understand the busy schedules, everyone, and the busy schedules of community councils, and we're really appreciative that the district boundary review is coming to this forum to be discussed. So we are here today through community council to discuss the district boundary review and specifically phase one. I want to start this out a little bit different than we have some of our other presentations and say why we're here is this is a legislatively required process. It is something that is required in the Municipal Government Act, and it is something that has been built into the governance proceedings in Nova Scotia. A boundary review is required every 8 years, and we are at our 8-year timeline. So we are doing it this year and looking at an overall review of the governance of the HRM and looking at the boundaries as well. So what we are here today is to talk about phase one. I'll ask for the next slide to go up, please. Phase one is a review of council's governance structure, provides a rationale for the number of councillors and polling districts within the HRM. It is a requirement of the district boundary review and must be done prior to phase two, which looks at the actual boundaries. For the 2022 review, Regional Council has designated Executive Standing Committee as the body to undertake portions of this review, specifically phase one. And for phase one, Executive Standing Committee is looking at and advising on the strengths and challenges and opportunities of the existing governance model for Regional Council. It will provide direction on the public engagement, which brought us here this evening. Members will participate in engagement sessions, and we will be providing a what we heard report from phase one of the engagement to Executive Standing Committee. This recommendation will come to Executive Standing Committee on or before June 14th, 2022, and will provide a recommendation on the number of polling districts required for effective governance within the HRM. I will briefly touch on phase two, if we could go to the next slide. Phase two is a part of the district boundary review process and looks at the actual distribution and borders of polling districts within the HRM. It is a requirement of the Municipal Government Act and looks and considers the number of electors, relative parity of voting power, population density, communities of interest, and geographic size. On February 8, 2022, Halifax Regional Council approved an administrative order creating the first ever district boundary resident review panel to complete and participate in phase two. This panel is responsible for making recommended adjustments to the existing boundaries in accordance with the objectives set out in the Municipal Government Act and the direction provided in phase one of the review. I'll now pass it on to Liam McSween, who will go over some specific aspects of the review, who will talk about at a high level on the governance of the HRM. And then we will have time at the end for questions from members of the Community Council.
Thank you very much, Ian. And next slide, please, Joe. So the aspects of the review are the district boundary application to the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board should reflect existing legislation and not assume any future amendments. The public engagement process for phase one of the district boundary review should therefore focus on changes with respect to the size of council and the governance structure permitted within the current legislative framework. During this review and so far through some of the public engagement activities, there have been multiple aspects identified that are not within the jurisdiction of the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board. There's the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board does not have the ability to amend legislation. That power lies with the provincial legislator of Nova Scotia, and that includes amendments to things like the HRM Charter, the Municipal Elections Act, and the Municipal Government Act. Past councils have identified governance priorities that, although they're not in the jurisdiction of the Nova Scotia Utility Review Board, are potential opportunities for legislative change. So this includes things like extending voting rights to permanent residents and landed immigrants, designated seats for certain groups, things like lowering the voting age from 18 to 16, and those types of amendments. So we're fully intend to hear those types of things as we move through both phase one and phase two of the district boundary review process. We will be documenting those items and returning to council through the Executive Standing Committee with a path forward to pursue those items should council wish to do so. Next slide, please. With respect to Halifax Regional Council, Halifax Regional Council serves as the decision-making body for the Halifax Regional Municipality. It is comprised of 16 councillors who represent 16 electoral districts and one mayor who's elected at large, and is governed by the HRM Charter. Sections 8 and 9 of the HRM Charter establish the minimum requirements for the size of council and representation for each polling district. The government, so Section 8, sub 1 and 2 say that the municipality is governed by a council consisting of at least 3 members, and 1 counselor shall be elected for each polling district within the municipality, so 1 per district. Similarly, the election of mayor, the mayor shall be elected at large, and every person who is eligible to vote for counselor is eligible to vote for the mayor. Next slide, please. This slide gives an overview of the current governance structure for the Halifax Regional Municipality. You can see Halifax Regional Council at the top, and the various and assorted standing community councils and standing committees. So we've got 4 community councils, 6 standing committees, 7, of course, when you include the budget committee for the budget committee of the whole, which meets as required. Advisory boards, committees, and commissions, which report into those standing committees and community councils. And of course, you can see the individuals that make up those advisory committees and commissions, along with members of regional council. Administrative Order 48, respecting the creation of community council, has delegated certain authorities to community councils in accordance with the sections 30 and 31 of the HRM Charter. And sections 30 and 31 give community council the ability to hear variance appeals and site plan appeals, approve development agreements and agreements to development agreements where the applicable municipal planning strategy provides for it, amend a land use bylaw if the amendment carries out the intent of the municipal planning strategy. The charter gives council the discretion in how it conducts its affairs, including granting council the authority to establish community councils, standing committees, and advisory committees, and they can assign certain duties to them. Section 21 of the HRM Charter gives council the ability to create standing, special, and advisory committees. In 2012, Halifax Regional Council created a standing committee system and reporting structure for each of its associated advisory committees. The standing committee structure was adopted out of several governance reviews, which date back to the amalgamation of the former municipal units of Dartmouth, Halifax, Bedford, and Halifax County in 1996. In moving to a standing committee structure, council cited the need to reduce the number and complexity of advisory committees, improve the efficiency and effectiveness of council decision-making, bring strategic focus, bring to council strategic focus to well-defined policy and program areas, fill in policy development gaps, and provide accountability and oversight to advisory committees. Their main objective is to monitor current program delivery, service levels, emerging issues, recommending policy and program changes to council, and providing a forum for public participation. Phase 1 of the review focuses on gathering measurable data from the public and council on how the current model is working and what changes or improvements should be considered to make it more effective. Next slide, please. This slide gives us an overview of the community councils. So we are currently at Regional Center Community Council, which meets as required. And then, of course, the other community councils are listed there. Harbor East Marine Drive Community Council, which represents districts 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Halifax and West Community Council, districts 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Northwest Community Council, 1, 13, 14, 15, and 16, and Regional Center Community Council, which comprises the Regional Center area, districts 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Next slide, please. The Community Council, again, a little bit more on the roles and authority. Community Council is able to consider development variances and site plan approvals, consider development agreements, hold public hearings, consider amendments to land use bylaws, advise council on municipal planning strategy amendments, recommend to council expenditures to be financed by area rates, establish advisory committees, make council appointments to standing committees, make recommendations to council on public appointments. And there is new legislation, Bill 137, which may have an impact on the recommendation of some planning advisory decisions. Standing committees. In 2012, Halifax Regional Council created the standing committees to examine specific issues outlined in their terms of reference. And this is all outlined in Administrative Order 1, which is the procedures and rules for council administrative order. There are 6 standing committees, and of course, the Budget Committee, which is a standing committee and is comprised of all members of council and meets as required. The Appeals Standing Committee is a decision-making body. It's good to point that out, that it has the final say on appeals and dangerous and unsightly premises orders within the municipality. And then, of course, there's Audit and Finance, the Community Planning and Economic Development Standing Committee, the Environment and Sustainability Standing Committee, Transportation, and Executive. All of these standing committees, with the exception of appeals, provides recommendations and advice to council on specific matters within their terms of reference. They have the ability to request staff reports, and are the primary forum for public input. So in Administrative Order Section 43, we do have a public participation component at each of these standing committees where the public are invited to come and speak about anything that may be in that particular standing committee's terms of reference. Next slide, please. Advisory boards, committees, and commission. HRM's boards and committees are groups consisting of counselors, residents, and subject matter experts that provide advice and recommendations to council on certain matters. They have specific terms of reference that guide the work that they do. And this is a good opportunity for those who wish to volunteer, for members of the public to serve on these HRM boards and committees. Some committees are comprised entirely of members of the public, and the majority of which are mixed with members of the public and members of regional council. Next slide, please. Population growth will certainly influence the boundary review process now and in future years. Increases in population within the HRM do not happen equally. So there's different trends within certain districts, different districts within the HRM in terms of overall population and where people are moving and doing business. The Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board requires relative parity of voting power. So that's all districts have roughly the same number of electors, so each vote carries the same weight. And the variance that the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board looks for in this situation is plus or minus 10%. There is an opportunity for up to plus or minus 25% voter parity, but the higher the deviation you have over that 10% number, the more justification is required when we're talking about populations within districts. So they like to see it within 10% of that average population. Slide, please. The current population and number of electors since the 2010 review, HRM has grown by 70,410 residents to a total of 443,089 people. The Halifax Regional Municipality is in the top 6 of the 25 largest municipalities in Canada with a 9.1% population growth rate from 2016 to 2017. It's important to note that at the time that this information was compiled, we're using the data from the 2016 census. And this really has to do with the timing of the federal census, the 2021 census. It is still being assessed to determine a district by district comparison on the current population and numbers of electors. We did get just yesterday, I believe, or 2 days ago rather, there was a dump, a large data release that gives us a little bit more demographic information, but we will not have the district by district comparison based on the 2021 numbers until later in the year, probably close to the fall. So we will provide that information as we move into phase 2, but the numbers that we're working on are projections that were made based on the 2016 data. So the population growth will influence the boundary review process, and it needs to be factored within the public outreach for phase 1, and has been. Members of the public must clearly understand the number of residents and electors in each district to provide an informed opinion on how effectively they're being represented, and changes to the size, and if changes to the size or governance structure of council should be considered. Next slide, please. This slide provides a breakdown of the number of electors and population. So we have the current population there for each of the 16 districts and the current number of electors. Number of electors is important. We provided that information because that is the factor that the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board looks at when they're making their evaluations on things like relative power of voter parity and those types of things. We've thought it was very, very important to include the population as well in these numbers. And you can see in the column to the right, the projected number of electors by 2024. So you can see the differences in growth. Next slide, please. And this slide is just a continuation of those 16 districts to provide an idea of the numbers that we're looking at. Next slide, please. As part of the phase 1, we've provided additional demographic information, both within the survey and some of the reports that we've provided to the Executive Standing Committee to provide a jurisdictional scan that utilizes census data from 2021 and includes information such as the population of each Canadian municipality, the number of councillors, and the electoral districts which are represented. The change in population growth from 2016 to 2021 is in there, and the percentage of overall population represented in each district. So you can see in this slide, we've got a few comparator cities: Winnipeg, the city of Hamilton, Quebec City, Halifax Regional Municipality is there in bold, Laval, London, Gatineau, and Saskatoon. And you can see the number of electoral districts and the number of residents that are represented per district, as well as their population. Next slide, please. The population summary, on average, HRM's councillors represent 27,693 residents and 22,406 electors per district. By 2024, the number of electors are projected to grow to 378,948, or 23,648 per district. And this is an average across the entire municipality. Of course, that's as we said earlier, it doesn't grow equally. So, but that would be an average. I'm going to turn it back over to Ian here for some to go over the phase one key considerations, and I will wrap up with questions and how to further engage after that. So over to you, Ian. Thank you.
Thank you, Liam. So I will be brief, but I do want to touch on what the goal of phase one is and what we're trying to accomplish through the public engagement and through the recommendations coming through Executive Standing Committee. We are looking at and have gone out to the public, trying to get some responses to some of these key considerations that you can see in front of you. Is what does success look like for phase one? Is providing recommendations or feedback on the current governance structure, the effective representation of the current governance structure, and what changes could be or should be considered through this process. As you all note, there has been some new information and new governance items that have come up through this process and while we've been going through this process. So those are going to be part of the considerations and part of the factors that we're looking at through this process and moving forward into the future. If we can go to the next slide, please. As we are going through, one of the main feedbacks that came from the NSU-ARB from the last review was asking members of the public, how many people do they think need to be on regional council to provide effective representation? Should it be more? Should it be less? So we have attempted to address the recommendations from the last review in our public engagement and through this process to try to ask those questions and provide that feedback in the what we heard reports. Next slide, please. Finally, then, and this is ultimately what comes down to from phase one is the size and number of polling districts, and that will come from phase one and will inspire the actual boundary conversations that will be occurring throughout the summer, fall, and into the winter for phase two. So that is what brought us here today. I will pass it over to Liam just to talk about the engagement opportunities and the next steps, and then we will have an opportunity if there are any questions.
Thank you very much, Ian. And just a few points on how individuals and members of the public can continue to engage. So the first bullet point, the public engagement survey from Narrative Research has officially closed on April the 25th. So that Narrative Research, we contracted to help us with some of the public engagement outreach and the analysis of that data. And that's currently what they're doing right now. They're taking the results of the survey responses and comprising that into the What We Heard report, which will be presented to the Executive Standing Committee in May. There are public information meetings. This is the last of the public information meetings hosted by Community Council. So there were 3 others held between April 19th and April the 28th. Many of you councillors were involved in those meetings already. So thank you very much for your participation and your feedback that you've provided. Very, very much appreciated. So this is the last opportunity there. What we still have available, though, is corresponding with the Executive Standing Committee. So members of the public who wish to engage further, if they haven't had an opportunity to do the survey or if they haven't had an opportunity to come and participate in one of these public information meetings, they can certainly go to the District Boundary Review website at halifax.ca/boundary review. district boundary review, and they can certainly get in contact with the executive standing committee and review the information that we have on the website and get in contact that way and provide their commentary on the phase 1 parameters. Also included with this, there is currently underway, and I believe nearly wrapped up, Narrative Research is conducting individual interviews with members of regional council. I know many of you have gotten the opportunity to touch base with Narrative and provide your commentary and your experiences, and that is very much appreciated. So again, that will be all information that will be brought forward by them and included in the What We Heard report when we get to the executive standing committee in May 30th, where we'll bring the final report and recommendation on phase 1 forward for debate and discussion. We're looking at this meeting to have all members of council invited and encouraged them to participate in this process, to get involved in that the discussions on that report. And certainly there is an opportunity for the public to participate in that meeting as well at the executive standing committee to speak during public participation and certainly get their correspondence in and participate and view the meeting. We will certainly help facilitate that process. So with that, I will go to the next slide, and thank you very much for listening to our presentation tonight, and would be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ian and Liam, for that. So we'll go now to members of council to see if anybody has any questions for you this evening.
I have one.
Councillor Mason, go ahead.
Since we've all convened here today, I thought I'd just ask a nagging question. So when they say plus or minus 10%, is that a 10% variation between the biggest and the smallest, or 10% above and below the average?
I think Ian had an answer. It was a head shake. I think it was the later one, if I can interpret that.
Yeah, sorry, and then I was fighting with the mute button as well. So we will be providing a phase 2 information report on the process when we bring this forward as well to talk specifically on phase 2. But yeah, we'll be providing a average population metric and a plus or minus 10% based on that, is my understanding. But we will be providing that. One of the pieces of feedback that has come from these conversations that we're quite happy with is really trying to put some education into the process for this. And we are going to be trying to put that forward as much as we can on phase 2 to make sure we're proactive on those conversations, because they will absolutely be an important part of the community consultation.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I guess 10% doesn't sound like that much, but when it's 10% above and below, then it could be a 20% delta between the biggest and the smallest, and that to me is a lot. So, and it's funny because all these things are basically subjective gut checks, right? It's like I don't have any kind of like evidence, or I haven't looked at why the Supreme Court has ruled this way in the past and that kind of thing. So I don't know, but it's just good to know exactly where it stands. It could be as much as roughly 5,000 voters different, 4,000 or 5,000 voters different between one district and the other, and that seems like a lot to me. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Councillor Smith has a question too.
Yeah, 2 quick ones. One, I'm just wondering from Ian or Liam, have we had much interest from residents at all in the process? Have they reached out and just wanted to know about the process or provided feedback? And the other one is, I guess, the elephant in the room with the new provincial task force. Is that going to change how we engage in phase 2? Because they have made changes with our standing committees. So yeah, just wondering how you're approaching that, because I don't remember how long is it, 5 years or is it 10 years that sticks? So just wondering how that gets intertwined with this process.
Thank you, Councillor Smith, through Chair Austin to yourself. I'll start with the second question first. We are looking at the effects of Bill 137 on all of our committees and the terms of reference and how they'll be affected. And that won't be a quick process for all of it. So we are doing that as a result of that bill being put into place. So that is in process, and that will information will be coming out as soon as we're able to, that talks about what will happen with some of the committees, what will happen with the members of those committees, and what will happen with some of the items and how those move forward. So that is being worked on. For the phase 2 engagement, an important factor will be getting the resident review panel onboarded and getting a very good plan in place for the public engagement plan for phase 2. We will engage with them, work through executive standing committee to make sure that engagement occurs in the community, but also occurs with our community council process. So I don't believe the changes would preclude an item like this coming from a community council, but again, when those information items come forward, we will let you know. We did have very good response to the applications to serve on phase 2 of the resident review panel, and we're looking forward to that group coming on. We have seen a positive response to the survey on this. It has been a challenge developing and trying to find an effective way to do public consultation when we have had a few wrinkles with our public health orders and how our meetings are occurring. The survey response has been very positive. We actually had some meetings with our colleagues in planning and talked to them about our numbers, and they were quite pleased with the numbers that we had. And when we have them, when the What We Heard report is ready, we'll provide those and the statistics to all members of executive committee and regional council. But the final survey response should be over 1,000 unique responses that talking to the public engagement professionals that we've contracted to do this, they're quite happy with the statistical analysis and the data that is coming back that will be presented to and through the What We Heard reports.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Okay. Are you good, Councillor Smith? Okay. I don't see anyone else on the chat. Ms. Clerk, can you just confirm that we have no, I understand no one signed up for public participation tonight.
No, we did not have anyone sign up.
Okay, thank you for that. That's par for the course, but I understand we have had some good uptake on the survey online, so that's good on that part anyway. So that concludes this item as far as I can see. So we would be moving on to committee reports, of which we have none. Anything from members of community council? I see none here. Nothing. Committee updates, we have none. There's no motions. We have nothing in camera. There are no added items. Does anyone have any notices of motion? Hearing none. Public participation, which we've already clarified. No one signed up for general public participation. Is that the case, Ms. Clark?
That is correct.
Okay, so we have no public participation tonight. So that brings us to the date of our next meeting, if required, is May 25th, 2022. I would take a motion to adjourn.
Moved.
Moved by Councillor Mason. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.